for joining us. This is Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
And you're listening to Diesel Performance Podcast. Chris, we have had a really busy end of July over at Duramax Tuner and Calibrated Power.
Yeah, it's nice to see the end of the month wrap up the way it has. You know, a lot of shop work. Right?
Yeah.
A lot of trucks have come in. Everything from performance upgrades to diagnostics and everything and anything in between. So it's crazy to see the versatility with the techs in the shop and them being able to adapt all the different types of projects that do come in.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, would you believe that we only launched the 351 VE and 300 VG Stealth 64s July 4th?
For that turbocharger to be out literally a month, the reception that I have personally gotten, you know, it's crazy. It's been a big success, and not gloating or anything like that, but it's really nice to see man hours and manpower go into R&D on a project. And then between the R&D staff, marketing, media, be able to come together, you know, that product works really, really well. For any of our listeners, you know, not as a sales pitch, but if you're interested in a turbo upgrade, I strongly encourage doing some research and having an understanding of what's currently in the market.
Sure.
And what options there are when you want to retain the variable vane geometry. Because I'll tell you what, that Stealth 64 is a killer option. I'm really happy with the way it runs on my truck.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the interesting things is I think for you who's had it on your truck throughout R&D for a long time now, have swapped over to the twins to go to the single and then been driving it and all the different revisions. I know for me, we've been looking at it on the marketing side for 6 months or so.
Yep.
I sat down today and I was like, oh my God, the turbo's only been on the market for a month. And it feels like we've been doing it forever, right?
Yeah. I think what's the biggest home run is, you know, when you do the R&D, it's in a controlled environment, right? Like it's one truck or two trucks, and it's the same dyno, and it's the same air quality, and it's the same workload. But then to have customers, like some of those early adopters that I've, you know, had great relationships over the years, that I had guys that have had compounds on their trucks that pulled them off for the single, similar to what I did. I have guys that are looking for that single turbo upgrade, and they did that upgrade. To get that same type of response and feedback that I physically have,
right,
is kind of like that. Okay, like, you know, we're on to something. Like
it's
that.
Validating.
That hour, those years of R&D, you know, it was a year and a half, you know, in R&D at this rate, was invested for the right reasons.
Right.
You know, so like I said, I think that's going to be a home run charger. I foresee that one being one of those that's going to be hard to keep on the shelf for some time.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see where that thing goes.
Absolutely, guys. If you want to learn more about that turbo or any of the other Stealth turbos, go and visit DuramaxTuner.com today, or shoot us a message over on our Fans of Diesel Performance Podcast Facebook group. It's a fun group. We have a lot of cool stuff going on. We try to share some of the promos, drop some early tidbits about products that are going to be released from some of our sponsors. Speaking of our sponsors, why don't we kick it over and hear from them real quick?
Upgrade the factory transmission oil cooler in your truck with the XDP Extra Cool Direct Fit Transmission Oil Cooler. The XDP Extra Cool Direct Fit Transmission Oil Coolers provide you with an upgraded bolt-on design. Each transmission cooler is built with a high-efficiency core to maximize cooling. Designed as a direct fit replacement, this transmission cooler comes ready to install with all the brackets, hardware, and accessories needed for installation. To find out more about the XDP Extra Cool Direct Fit Transmission Oil Coolers, check out xdp.com or find a local dealer near you.
Worley Custom Fab has been providing custom upgrades for the Duramax, Cummins, and Power Stroke community for over 15 years. Jason, Ryan, and the rest of the Worley crew are known for their excellence in not just fabrication, but also finish and fit and form. So we know that it's going to be a high-performing part. We know that it's going to look amazing. And because of Worley custom powder coating, we also know we can get it in absolutely any color we want. If you're thinking about upgrading the airflow, or you're thinking about traction bars, or you're thinking about upgrades that WC Fab can help you with, stop what you're doing right now and go to WCFab.com today. The Exergy Performance Fuel System Saver works. If you have a CP4 equipped fuel pump, which is commonly found on the 2011 to 2016 LML Duramax, and also the early 6.7 liter Ford Power Stroke engine, they're known for failure, period. Now, most of the time, if you put a lift pump on the truck, you'll prevent a lot of the potential failures. If you do regular maintenance, you can help prevent the potential failures. But at the end of the day, there's still a risk that no matter what you do, that CP4 could fail. And when they fail, they have a track record for sending all of the metal shavings downstream. So you end up needing a whole new fuel system, new lines, new injectors, new tubes, new everything. That could be very expensive. Even if you're under warranty or you find a bundle package for a great price, there's still a lot of labor that goes into that job. The fuel system saver increases the amount of protection post CP4. So it's not going to stop your CP4 from failing. What it's going to do is that, God forbid, the CP4 gives up and it starts to send metal debris through the truck. It's going to stop it before it hits the rest of your fuel system. And that's why they call it the fuel system saver. If you have a CP4 pump on your truck, you absolutely need to give DuramaxTuner.com a call today and get yourself a fuel system saver. And we're back. Chris, I am excited. Usually we do a guest, or you and I will go do a ride-along or something like that, and then we have on a couple of other segments with our super tech, Jeremy Garnett, and then, of course, our remote support expert, Sean Lynn. This week, Jeremy's segment's so big that we had to bump our interview and have Jeremy just be our interview.
I would have to tell you, Paul, when I think of an influx in calls that come into the office, the number one is always in the spring and the fall, and that's regarding fuel mileage with fuel.
Yep.
Okay. Miraculously, guys' trucks get better in the summer months, right? And they don't understand why. And then their trucks go to shit in the winter. They don't understand that. But the next probably notch of phone calls that we get volume-wise is setting up trucks for sled pulling around sled pull season. Yeah. And we're in the mecca of sled pulling, being in the Midwest. Like, if you own a diesel truck, you've either been to, have participated in, or have heard of a county fair with sled pulling.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that, it's a natural thing that you do. And I think that a lot of guys, they go into this because they have a diesel truck, gas truck, whatever. But there's some stuff you need to do to prepare before you try lugging that sled 300 feet.
You know, I love this too, because I think so many people show up and watch a fair sled pull a couple of times, or maybe when they're young and then their buddies get into trucks and they get into trucks and they're like, all right, man, so I got an F-250, let's go pull it.
Let's go yank the sled.
And that's it. Yep. And they really not much more thought into that until something breaks. And then the next year they're out there and they've spent some money.
Yep.
And then they do mediocre in the pack. Yep. And then they're like, okay, so I'm going to spend some more money to do it. And I don't know how many guys we talked to that spent that money the wrong way 3 times.
Every guy that you talk to wants to be the local hero at their local sled pull, at their local county fair. They want to be the guy on top. They want to be able to flex and say that their truck's the most badass.
I got it. And speaking of setting up a truck to be the most badass, we have a really cool program we do where, with the local sled pull club around us, ISP, that's Illini State Pullers, we sponsor a shootout.
Yep.
So it's 3 pulls. You have to go to
all
3 different county fairs, which are consecutive, and then pull. And then what we'll do is we record the distance from each pull, and at the end, the top 3 longest distances, they win, right? So we put up
now,
some prize money.
Now, there's some stipulation around this. So it's stock appearing turbochargers, right?
That is
so
right.
we call it the stealth shootout, okay? And this is any stock appearing turbocharger, any of the competitors in this space. It has to be a stock appearing turbo. That's the only caveat. So it doesn't matter what the inducer is on the compressor. It doesn't matter what compressor wheel you have. That does not matter. The setup of the truck doesn't matter. It just has to be stock appearing.
That's right. And we've set this up because, well, we know that there's a lot of guys out there who don't qualify to pull in like an official work stock.
Well, now let's classify that, right?
Yeah.
Over the last, I would say, 8 years, okay, every year there are new rules and regulations around some of the classes. And work stock isn't necessarily that same work stock as it once was.
Well, work stock, I feel like, is getting squeezed out in a lot of places where now they're requiring you have to be a stock turbo only.
Yep.
Or you go up to like a 2.5 class.
And that's big money. That's serious trucks. Like you're talking a professionally set up truck to pull in a 2.5, which is unfortunately your entry level these days.
Right. Yeah. Hanging weights,
Yep.
like a giant weight box up front.
Yep.
That's entry level. So we wanted to kind of bring back that work stock, that daily driver enthusiast who wants to go out and compete once a year.
Yep.
I don't want to have a truck just solely dedicated to sled pull. I want to drive this thing to work on Monday.
You want that average
and
driver.
on Tuesday, I want to hit the sled pull track.
But even with that, there are modifications that need to take place to the chassis to not just be competitive, but be reliable.
That's right. And so that is why we have with us today our super tech, Jeremy Garnett. Jeremy, how the hell are you?
Wonderful. How are you?
Doing good, man. Jeremy, usually you and I get to do your super tech segment alone. We got Chris in here today, so I'm sorry.
I know. It's kind of weird. It's
He's not making eye contact.
That's what I mean. I kind of feel like I'm, in a sardine can,
I thought it was just my mustache. Either way.
Jeremy, you have the truck that we're sending out to the Stealth Turbo Shootout, getting ready right now.
Yes.
So that's been the thing that you're working on. Chris, we had, I think, probably too long of a discussion on which company truck to send to the shootout. So we talked about sending Nick's 2020 L5P. He was not interested. Nope. We talked about sending, we have a dually LML, but it's two-wheel drive, so that wasn't a legit option. We talked about sending the Apache, but one of the sled pulls was kind of far away, and I don't think we were going to get Nick to commit to drive out there, and having somebody else drive it anymore is like getting less and less
he
common.
He wanted to drive all three of those.
Yeah.
If it was the Apache.
Yeah, that's what it came down to. And then there were a few others in the fleet that we talked about. We just decided we've done it, or maybe the truck's not ready, or we have some different plans for the future.
What it really boiled down to is we have a good amount of employees here, and we've used some of those guys, or those guys have used the opportunity in the past to go sled pull.
Yeah.
And work stock is really that like stock truck with some bolt-on upgrades. We have some newer employees at the shop that they wanted to kind of get involved, and guys that have been here for a while, but they really haven't sled pulled, and they wanted to get involved. So we figured we have an 02 LB7.
Yeah.
It's really the run of the mill. It really resonates, I think, with a good portion of our customers. 180,000 mile crew cab short bed. It's got the built transmission. It has stock injectors. It has some fuel system upgrades like a lift pump, and we did do the CP3 because the original CP3 was starting to fail. And it has one of our drop-in chargers. It's really one of those, like, you can go on Craigslist, you could find a stock truck, and if you had some money to throw at it, you could replicate this for relatively a decent cost. And the idea here is that this truck is perfect for someone to get their feet wet with sled pulling.
That's right. Absolutely.
So 100%.
So Jeremy, you got the truck, and it had a built trans, a turbo, and the fuel system was done on it.
Yeah,
so,
what Chris just said was exactly what was done to it.
So that's how it got rolled over to you. Now, the truck is usually used to basically run parts.
Yeah, it's basically
it hauls a trailer
parts and
once
testing,
in a great while.
Parts and testing.
A little bit of testing here and there. So you got the notice, hey, we're going to go sled pull with this truck. Did you get a parts list of here's the things we want you to put on it, or did Nick just hand it off to you and say, like, we want to go sled pull, go get it ready?
Basically, here's a truck. This is what we want to do with it.
Okay.
So, okay, now then that's when we start going over the parts list. Okay, what do we want to do? How far do we want to go? And how big do we want to compete?
So what that parts list look like, since the drivetrain, as far as the trans and motor, those are pretty much set up. Yeah. So everything we're talking about might be suspension wise, stuff like that. So
exactly.
What's that stuff look like to prepare for something like this?
Well, first thing we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure the hitch was okay.
Okay.
Because an 02 thing's already 19 years old.
Yeah.
20 years old. So hitch. Well, we decided the hitch wasn't good enough because it's just a stock hitch, rusty. We want to make sure it's going to be able to pull.
We've seen guys at sled pulls. The sled took up to the trailer and the hitches fall off the fucking truck. Yeah. So that's real. I
was at a pull with you last year.
Yeah.
And then it happened.
Yep.
But yeah, and then tie rod sleeves. Tie rod sleeves. And then we're also going to put on this one because it's a cheap upgrade. We're going to do the idler arm and pitman arm. The the braces for it.
Okay.
As a dirty hooker,
Yeah.
all the guys sell them, but yeah, I mean they're a cheap upgrade. We just want to make sure that suspension is low and
So
it stays.
Let's talk about this a little more. Let's dive into this. So we're talking primarily these are upgrades that would be done on a Duramax, and this is mainly due to the IFS front end.
Yep.
Right. So as far as the tie rod ends or tie rod sleeves, like what's the purpose of doing tie rod sleeves, and what is the purpose for dropping the front end of the truck?
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean the tie rods. I mean everybody knows that they're just from the factory. They're tiny.
Yep.
I mean, and once you drop the front end, because of course you want the front end dropped as far as you can, because in 4 tow haul, you have a pull on a sled, you're going to pull the front end up, and you're putting so much torque on it, the tie rods just want to tow in.
That's
so,
right.
and when they tow in, if you don't have those sleeves on there, what's going to happen is those tie rods are just going to bend.
Yep.
And then
Potentially break.
Potentially break, right. And if you're one of those guys that actually wants to drive the truck home, I mean, you're going to be driving home with the tires towed in.
I mean, there's another one that we've seen quite a few just nasty
one of the wheels
Yeah.
just wheel goes left, wheel goes right, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So if you could imagine your front end looking like duck's feet and just pointing in two totally opposite directions, I mean, that's really what happens when your tie rods snap.
And what's crazy with that too is for one, that's a huge oversight with guys.
Yeah.
And it's a novice rookie move, but like tie rod sleeves are cheap. Like they're $60.
I was gonna say they're under $100.
Yeah, they're
with
like
shipping.
the cheapest insurance for the front end. That is the cheapest way to ensure that you have a higher probability of driving the truck home.
Yeah.
Right.
know.
I mean,
Yeah.
even if you're just going to the track, or you're not going to, I mean, you're doing a dirt track, a race track, or
Or you just drive like
or
an
you just drive
asshole.
like an ass, right?
Yeah.
I've had guys where they're hunters,
Yeah.
and they'll drive their trucks off road, and they'll break a tie rod just going off road, being in
yeah.
4-wheel drive on that uneasy ground.
Yeah, I
You know,
remember
I've
the
heard of it.
first dyno day we had. I met a customer who swore up and down that somebody had stolen his truck, and when they were backing it out, they backed it out up on top of one curb and then went to go pull out, and it went too wide, and
The
they bumped
vulnerable-
it into the curb, the front tires into the curb on the opposite side of the street, snapped the tie rod, the guy jumped out and ran away.
Jesus.
So he is like, oh man, great security insurance. And I'm like, I don't know if that's what I would call that. You lucked out.
That's a
yes,
wild story.
But yeah, but it is, right. So it's they're one of those vulnerable spots, and it's pretty easy. What is putting on a set of tie rod sleeves do? Because I have seen guys fuck that up.
Literally, you have to.
They can't count the threads.
Exactly, they can't count the threads. No, it's literally just taking the outer tie rods off, and then you have to take the jam nut off, and then the new tie rod sleeve is actually the new jam nut for the tie rod and to tighten it back up.
Okay. Now, when you guys are talking about counting the thread, what does that mean?
So on an inner and outer tie rod end, there's threads on it, so you adjust toe in and out. So when we take the outer tie rod off, we just want to count how many threads and so revolutions it takes to come off.
Okay.
So and then we want to be able to put that tie rod back on after we put the sleeve back on, the same amount revolutions.
Gotcha.
That way you can avoid, having to go in for another alignment.
Exactly.
You
Yep.
know?
That's really what it comes down to, right?
right.
It's just knowing that ahead of time, like, think it through. Don't be me and look at the job and go, oh, well, I just take that part off and put this part on.
Simple.
And then get done and be like, man, why does it drive like shit? Like, my tire is
Now
making
you
a
just paid
squealing
another
sound.
$1,400 on 2 tires because sled pull
Right.
tires are expensive, for the type of tire that you need to use.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we get the front end beefed up, right? We have all that. What else goes into
Well, can I
preparation?
just real quick,
Yeah.
Chris, Pittman and Idler Arms, you mentioned a brace kit. I remember always talking guys up into like the full kryptonite front end
Man.
package with a new Pittman.
that
and
wasn't your
Idler
money getting
Arms.
spent.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, of course.
Shit.
But they make nice stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
for
you got to admit, like it's Cognito or
Cognito or Kryptonite. Those
like,
are
they're
the
killer.
two. If you're buying a front end for a Chevy, that's the route
That
to
is
go.
what you do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, you
But
just can't beat it.
the brace. So what
Yeah.
is the difference in the brace, like as far as performance goes? Is it going to hold up as well as go into like the full new front end?
Well, so actually, your new Cognito and Kryptonite front ends come with these braces.
Gotcha.
Their own version with their upgraded parts.
Okay.
But they actually make factory ones that actually keeps that center link, that is attached to the idler and Pittman arm, and it keeps it
More stable.
more stable.
Gotcha.
I mean, and it just keeps it from flexing. And what you're trying to do is all you want to do is keep those wheels straight and low.
Yeah.
And straight and low, and the more you can do that with the braces and those tie rod sleeves, the better chance you're going to have.
I like that.
Now, So the front end we want low,
Yep.
right?
Real
Makes
low.
sense.
Yeah,
Now
as
we
low
drop
as
the
we
tire
can.
pressure. This is another one that I think we skip over a
I
lot.
think
We'll get to that.
We'll get to
Okay.
the tire pressure part because I want to, and I got excited talking about the back end. Anyways, so you have the front end low, right? And the idea there is the contribution of weight, right? As the truck comes and it's making its power, the back end is going to be fixed more or less, and
Right.
that's rear end suspension stuff.
Yep.
And you want the front end to be low because you want to have the front tires still dig. You want
Yes.
those front tires pulling the chassis.
Right.
So what do we do on the rear end?
So what we do on the rear end is we actually put we do two different things for budget. If we're doing it, we're going to do it cheap, easy, so that we're going to use leaf spring clamps. And we're going to actually clamp the leaf springs in the front and the rear. And instead of putting a set of traction bars on this truck for, hundreds and hundreds of dollars, we're going to actually just put clamps on it. So we're going to try to keep the axle from wrapping.
Okay.
So if we can actually take those leaf springs and we can tie them together and clamp them together, that'll stop the rear end from wrapping.
Because there's less flex.
Because there's less
that
flex.
momentum.
Right.
It's not.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So it's a cheap way of doing it. The right way, of course, would be putting traction bars on it, but
That's not what this truck is
that's
set
not
up
what this
for.
truck's for.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And then what also we're going to do is we're going to put a set of suspension stops in it.
Now,
So
what's the purpose of that?
the suspension stops for the purpose is so the hitch height on our trucks here have to be 26 inches. Well, if we don't want the rear end to squat, so what we want it to do is those suspension stops are going to be a half inch off the axle, and then it's going to hold that hitch high in the air.
So you're saying sled drops onto the hitch.
Yep.
You're going to have a half inch of compression, more or
Yep.
less, of the spring, and then the bump stops stop the truck from dropping any lower.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we want the rear end high, the front end low.
Okay. And that's basically how you're fixing that weight distribution,
Yep.
so the truck doesn't have that too much of that.
It
that
doesn't turn into a
teeter-tottering.
Carolina
Right.
squat.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, the other thing I know on pinching the leaf springs is you're trying to prevent some of the bounce there.
Bounce,
Right.
yeah.
So that's a real big one, but that'll kill your truck as you're down the track.
Both do that. So by
Yeah.
actually
Yeah,
suspension stops
suspension
and,
stops as
and
well.
that will stop bounce. But again, the whole idea is keep that rear end high so your front end is lower, the front end is digging better.
Right.
Now, one of the things that I always notice when I go to a sled pull is these trucks look like their tires are flat.
Yeah, you want to run 15 pounds of air.
15
10
pounds.
pounds of air in them. You want those tires to grab.
Now that's going to also, the one thing that I always do when I go to the sled pulls is I always try not to be first. And I watch what the other guys are doing and what they're setting their tire pressures to, and then seeing how the dirt is, seeing how the ground is.
Yeah.
And then I kind of position myself for tire pressure based off of what other guys are doing.
If the track's really dry,
Yeah.
do you take your pressure up or down?
I would say if the track is dry, pressure down.
Yep.
And if it's really sticky dirt,
Then
down or up?
I'm going to have a little extra
I'll
pressure.
have a little
little
extra, yeah.
Yep.
And then I usually bring a little mini portable, plug-in cigarette lighter compressor that'll give
Something
you
that you
20
and I
pounds.
never do.
Yeah.
ever. We could always go down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could always show up and go down and be like, we'll go to the gas station to get it back up to
Right.
get home.
But at that point,
Okay, and that, well, speaking of tires and stuff, but that's what we also did. Is we took the stock tires off it, so it was a 265,
Yep.
and now we want a
Real
bigger,
small.
real small. We want a bigger tire. So on this,
you want
Well, I want to hit on the tire pressure a little bit more.
Okay.
So as
Oh,
we're
wow.
talking about dropping
you
the
don't,
tire
you don't
pressure.
comprehend low and high.
Well, I think I got some of the direction about low and high.
I need more on pressure.
What I want to understand and what I want listeners to understand is really like when you're dropping it, what's the benefit? What's the benefit of lowering your PSI or adjusting your PSI to the dirt? Is it about getting a wider footprint so the tire wraps over and you're
Exactly.
stretching out to more area?
The wider footprint, I think, is going to come into the tire size that you go with.
Okay.
The advantage of lower pressure is having more ability for that tire to grip into the dirt itself. If it's a dry dirt, right, and
Yeah.
it's a harder ground, and you have a tire pressure with 50 pounds of pressure, there's not much as you're turning that tire that it has to grip into.
tire balloon too. So,
Correct.
Yeah. Yep.
So you want that ability a little more squish because you want that tire to actually kind of compress into the dirt.
So a softer tire with less pressure, isn't it the same amount of weight on it? So the amount of pressure being applied to the ground is the same regardless of what your PSI is in the tire?
No, because the tire won't balloon as much with more pressure.
Okay.
So in the center
And
of
more
the tire,
force, the tire's
more
gonna
force, the center of the tire is going to balloon more. So less pressure, it won't balloon as much.
Okay, I'm with you.
So
Interesting. Okay, good. I'm glad. All right, so then how do you pick the right tire?
I like doing street aggressive, if that's even a word or saying.
Yeah.
Street aggressive. We like terra grapplers.
Okay.
Just because it's not a mud train, but it's a little bit more aggressive than an all train.
I think the tire that we have on that was the tire that we used on the Cummins back in 19 when Tim and I were doing a lot of sled pulling.
Yeah.
And it's not a terra grappler. Is it a trail grappler? It's
Ridge
a little
grappler.
something. Ridge grappler.
Ridge grappler,
A little
yeah.
more aggressive.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
definitely aggressive tire. Like the sidewall, the tread.
Yeah.
Like it's serious. It's
Yeah.
a serious meat to say the least.
Yeah,
Okay.
you want something that's going to grab the dirt and just be able to grip it. And
Yeah.
just-
Now, how long do you get out of a set of tires sled pulling? Because I've talked to guys that swear up and down that they do like 2-3 sets of tires every season.
I mean, I think that now you're talking die hard,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
money, like fuck the money, right? They wanna win and they go to every pull.
But if I'm a weekend warrior, do I need to go buy a set of tires? Can I run my stock tires on the dirt?
I think I wouldn't run a stock tire because as you turn the truck's power up, you also need you need gearing in your favor, right? So it's
Okay.
really common for sled pull guys to run like a 35 or a 34-inch tire, right? It's
Yeah.
just the nature of the beast.
As
like-
big as the class will allow you to.
Yeah, some classes might not have like a restriction, but you want to be able to run the biggest tire you can with clearing on the truck, and then you kind of want to gear up the tire size for the power output of the truck.
Okay.
Okay, so when you get into the the big power stuff, like 35s are kind of like that's the ticket.
And that's because I'm trying to change my gearing so that I get more power down low because I don't care about top speed because I'm not going to do more than 30 miles an hour.
You don't want to run out of gear up top. Right, so
Right.
you want to try to minimize the shifting, right? So if
Yeah.
you run out of gear, you don't want to run out of gear. You want to keep the engine in its sweet spot. But if you have like a 31-inch tire, like which is stock on our O2 LB7, and you're doing a second gear lock with the ability of the trans to shift into third, so second gear start with third, you're talking a few mile an hour that you're going to lose if you keep a 31 versus going with a 33.
Gotcha.
So it's all about keeping that engine in a rev range where it can be powerful, efficient, and not run outside of its RPM window where the trans needs to shift.
yeah, keeping that
That's
turbo
where shit
happy.
breaks.
Yeah, we've seen that once or twice.
We have.
People jumping
with
into
past
fourth and
trucks.
out of fourth,
Yeah,
and yeah.
Yeah, and this truck here is actually a 33
Yep.
because we're doing that within the power level.
Okay.
So, I mean, this truck isn't going to be tuned up to 800.
No, I mean, it's
No, it's 600
this
horsepower
is, a,
setup.
this is a
right?
turnkey 600 horse,
Yep.
average Joe daily driven truck.
Yeah, it's basically the biggest tire we could fit under it under a stock truck and still turn.
Oh man, every forum on earth just needs to hear that.
Still turn point.
What's the biggest tire I can fit on stock ride height? We've all heard it. We've all read that comment.
And no one ever puts offset in the wheel into consideration. So
No,
you have
no,
these
no.
guys
Yeah.
putting like 44 offsets on 35s, like just
Bro,
the whole
it
fender's
rubs.
fucked up.
It
like-
rubs.
It rubs.
Sawzall.
I mean, I've been there before. So.
Yeah, I've seen them. All right, so we did front end suspension, rear end suspension, hitch, tires. Anything else?
Well, you have to have the proper actually receiver in the hitch. So they won't let you pull if you don't have the proper hitch. And then also we put bump stops on ours just so the sled won't hit the back of the truck. I've only seen it happen once, but I don't want
happens.
that. It happens, and I don't want that to be when I'm driving.
Oh man, yeah. When the sled slaps the back end of that truck,
It's
it is violent.
I've never been in a truck when that happens, but I've been in the stands when that happens.
Yeah.
And in the stands, it's like, oh,
I've
my
been like
God.
15 feet away with a
Yeah.
camera pointed at it, and it hits, and you just
Boom.
you can feel every
Your body-
person
yep.
in there just cringe. Just literally shoulders come up, neck drops down. You're just like, oh, that hurt. Like,
Oh, everybody's gonna be like, "Oh, it just hit the bumper." Well, the bumper hit the bed sides, and
yeah.
the back
It's
of
also
the
like,
truck's jacked up.
are we pretending like bumpers are cheap all of a sudden?
Right,
Like, I didn't know everybody else had just an extra supply of bumpers to
Yeah.
throw on here.
But yeah, that and then like I said, the hitch height. Every category is different. Every state's different. Ours, we set ours to where we have to. But yeah, the hitch, you actually have to have a hook style or a round style hitch so they can hook the chain in.
The hoop.
A hoop style. Yep. And but yeah, hitch, and basically that's the basics.
There's the other one. I was at a sled pull at Rudy's years ago, and I was down there with a couple of guys who were kind of local to that area, and they were so excited to sled pull, like sat in a booth in like 120-degree Carolina heat all day long, just waiting for the sled pull to start. Sled pull starts, they roll their truck over to tech, turn around, come back looking mad as fuck. And I'm like, what's going on?
Yep.
They're like, wrong size hoop. We have whatever, a 2-inch hoop, and they're only using 2 3/4. So like they were out there cutting and welding hoops together to like get it to fit so the hook would fit.
Right.
Check the rules, man. Check the rules. Make a
exactly.
call. I've never met a sled pull organization or even a sled pull organizer, even if it's like just a brush pull, that you couldn't call and just ask the basics. Like, hey, what size hoop do I need?
right.
What is the maximum receiver hitch height that I'm allowed to run? Like they are very willing to give you these rules, very willing to give you these rules so that you don't end up showing up and then having to run out and wrench on the truck or cut shit apart or try to, fix something in a parking lot at a county fair, which
I think
we've all seen.
I think there's one of those things I guess it's a little different of a topic, but I always downplayed sled pulling until I really started doing it more, because there is an art to driving the truck. It's not just flat-footed and go type thing. So you're pissed off in the grounds, or right, and working on this, trying to get it to pass tech so you can pull.
Yeah.
Your emotions are high, your anxiety is high, rushing to get this done, and then you have to pull in front of a bunch of people with a sled behind you. You have one shot, and you want to do better than every other person you're competing against.
Right.
So, like, being that you go to an evening sled pull and you're only there for 3 or 4 hours, that time passes in the snap of a finger, and there's no do-over, there's no nothing. So it just goes by super fast. And your anxiety, my anxiety at least, is super high at that point, that like I never get to really enjoy any of it.
Yeah, Chris, you would get so anxious, you would do things like not turn the GoPro on, even though I told you to 1 minute before.
Well, like for me, it was always, the Cummins, you have it down to a science, and different turbocharger setups are going to drive differently on how you have to, to do your pull, and different ground conditions also play a role in how you're going to let the truck go off the line and make it down the track. So yeah, to your point, like I would always forget the GoPro footage because I was so in my head, like, okay, torque converter, tune, throttle, brake, and then that's all that was playing in my head the whole time. And it sounds so simple. Like I'm saying it now, I'm like, dude, I'm an idiot. Like,
right.
that's
I couldn't get through my 4-point checklist.
Yeah.
Fuck.
But then you have someone like, our Timmy, right, who did pulling, and there were times in the past where like he would hit the converter switch too early or too late. Like, simple move. And like for us, it's like, oh, that's so dumb that he did that. But it's like, no, like when you're in that moment and your adrenaline's going, like you're just thinking of what you need to do, not paying attention to the ground speed, RPM, gear. Like you have to have that sense of feeling across the entire board of the truck.
Sure.
So you know what you're doing.
Right. And I will say this, like with drag racing, there is definitely guys who have to spend a lot of time getting to know their truck and how the truck is going to hook up and how the truck is going to launch. But a lot of what they're learning is that very beginning of the race. Yeah. And then once you're down the track, it's more about like, do I need to pedal to manage the clock?
There were so many trucks that I personally competed with in 19. Yeah. Where bigger turbo trucks, more powerful trucks than what we had.
Oh, yeah.
And I would put 20, 30 feet on them for how I left the line.
Well, and that actually what I was going to say about sled pulling, what I've learned a lot is that it's after you leave the line, your checklist doesn't stop. No. Like you're not able to just flat foot and let her sing.
No.
Till you back at, like there is no back half again.
No.
Like if you got a bad launch off the line, you're probably out of the game. Yep. Right. So but even if you get a really good launch off the line, you get the sled and you're singing and the weight box is starting to come down and you can start to feel it slow down. How many guys do we know that then just put their foot to the floor right there?
Well, just 100%.
Give it everything she's got, baby. And like at a drag race, I get that concept. Like, okay, I fucked up my launch. I'm going to keep my foot pinned. If I got spray, I'm going to pray and go.
Yep.
And that's it. Like you just hold on. But at a sled pull, that's when you're going to break shit, jumping around gears when you don't know what you're doing, jumping up to fourth, down to third, back to second.
Which you don't necessarily have a ton of control on with what gear it's in at that point, but your skinny pedal, the skinny pedal does, and that's your foot.
That's it.
That's planning power to the ground, right?
Yeah.
And that's experience. That's knowing the truck,
But exactly what you guys were just saying now. Then you go into truck bounce.
Yeah.
When the truck starts bouncing.
So sure.
What do you do? The sled's coming down. The truck starts bouncing. Do you let off? Do you go in?
Oh, you lay in it harder. It starts bouncing. You want to see if you can bang your head off the roof. No,
So that's what I mean.
don't do that, guys.
It's
I'm just
the
joking.
same
Don't
thing,
do that.
You know, like with the
But then also, how far do you back out of it? How many
Right.
guys have we seen it starts bouncing
Snuffs
a
the
little
charger,
bit,
it's done.
and they
Right.
pull their foot all the way out, and you're like, what? Bro, you're at 120 feet. You can't repull. Like,
We've
you're
seen
stuck.
it 1,000 times where trucks run 100 feet. We're done.
I think the biggest thing for myself, because Jeremy, you've never sled pulled,
No, I've never done.
and
This
you're
will be my
doing
first-
it. You're
I'm
doing it
this
this
year. Yep.
no, it's next to coming weeks.
Yep.
The biggest thing that I had in the back of my mind is I'm not telling Nick I broke the truck. I'm not telling Nick I broke the truck because Nick doesn't let stuff go. Right? Like
Yeah.
he is all for you doing something until it costs the company money, and he's like, "What the fuck, bro? Like what was this?" So, to your point, like when the truck starts hopping, there's no right way to back out of the throttle, right? It's just it's a sense of feeling, and you either feel it and and you get lucky,
Yeah.
or you don't get lucky and you fuck the pull up.
Because we've seen guys that have a ton of experience that have still run into these problems,
Oh, yeah.
that still make these mistakes.
sure.
Just
Yeah.
because you've been doing it for 10, 20, 30 years, whatever, doesn't mean you're not going to get out there in the same truck you've pulled 30 times and have a problem this week. Some of this stuff, you can give yourself kind of put yourself in the best position possible, but there's no crystal ball.
No.
Nobody knows for sure this is going to fix it or this is going to take care
The
of
only
it.
thing you have the control over is, for myself, when I was doing a bunch of it, I would always have my foot on the brake, build up boost, leave on 15, 16 pounds. I never flat foot the truck. It was always a half throttle, and I would let off the brake as the truck was already going.
Yeah.
Okay. And then by like 80 to 100 feet, when I knew I was gaining that traction, I'm already doing 15 mile an hour. I know the vehicle is pushing and going forward, flat foot.
Yeah.
By that time, like you either got it or you don't. The truck starts hopping, you back out of the throttle slightly, not 100% because you don't want to lose your momentum. You don't want to lose turbo boost, but just enough to where you can tame the truck down, and then you feather into the throttle, right? You play with that to momentum. Momentum's the biggest thing in this.
It really
You
is.
got to keep the truck's momentum plunging forward because that's what's going to keep the sled moving forward.
And so that's an interesting thing to bring up. How many times have we heard guys say that they want to run at 4,500 RPM in their stock block Duramax? Like,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Every year.
Yeah.
Every spring, you
think-
get guys asking to run 4,500 RPM. And I understand the general concept of this. I want to run higher RPM so that when the weight hits, it'll pull me down into my peak power window. And I'm like, well, what if you were just making peak power the whole time?
Right.
Instead of being way past your efficiency window, burning a ton of extra, creating a ton of heat, and then not getting any more power out of the truck.
What I think it is, Paul, is it's learning from what you watch. So these guys that are in their work stock trucks are seeing the ultimate class, right? Where these engines are designed to run at 4,000, 5,000 RPM.
Yeah.
And that's not a stock appearing turbo stock motor truck. And yeah, the concept that they have of like bang 4,000 RPM and let it bring you down into your RPM window, yeah, in a theory, I guess it makes sense until you think of physics and you think of momentum, right? If you can keep the engine in its operating range and you can start, and you might not, start off with, I rather start a pull where I am building momentum in vehicle speed than start a pull with the truck just shredding the tires.
Right.
Yeah.
That you're
Not
losing.
gonna help.
You're losing
Yeah.
it at that point. The truck is trying to do something, but the momentum of the vehicle isn't doing anything.
Right. Yeah, if you see your ground speeds at 55 and you haven't moved 6 feet
Yep.
yet,
Right.
you fucked
You're
up.
done.
Something's
Yeah.
That sled's already starting to move.
Yeah.
That sled's already taking you for a toll. Like
That's it.
you're not going to make up that difference that distance in the back half, like at a drag strip, like
No.
you had mentioned.
No.
So
I love it. Man, this has been fun.
Yeah, this was a good one.
Jeremy, anything else you would recommend for somebody who's at home on a limited budget and just wants to pull at the county fair this year?
No, not really. That's the basics of just to get out there and use your stock truck and be able to drive home.
what would you say? Cut the Duramax out of the equation, Jeremy. Okay. You have a Cummins. Okay. It's shut up. You're tasteless. Let's say you got a Cummins. It's not a 4-link setup like a newer 4th or 5th gen.
So
Okay, so it's a Leaf setup.
Yep.
What are probably the most important budget-friendly upgrades that you would do to set up a truck on for that?
Bump stops. No, I'm sorry. Suspension stops. No
Okay.
bump stops. Suspension stops, especially because you can't lower the front end down,
Right.
Unless you're going to start changing
The springs and
and
stuff.
stuff like
Yep.
that. And tire pressure. I mean, and those, and honestly, that 06 we ran, you ran 2 years ago. I mean, I went to probably 10 of those poles. I set that truck up.
Yeah.
That truck is a stock suspension truck. and that truck competed every single time we went out with it.
No, that truck was consistent.
And the two things that were really done to that truck were suspension stops and tire pressure.
It's so easy, and yet we guarantee when we go out next week we're going to see somebody doing it wrong. But it's okay.
But that's
it's okay.
the part that I want to highlight with this. Like, even all the resources that this company and us have, right, and retain, things happen because you have one shot, you have that 10 seconds of fame. It's either you brought it or you didn't, and your anxiety and just everything rushes in at once, and it is so fun. That is the funnest 30 miles an hour I've ever done in a vehicle. Let me tell you.
You know what's going to be exciting for me on this one is so this could be the same truck, same setup, 3 different drivers.
Yep.
That's right.
That's what's going to be exciting for me because I'll be able to hear him, me, and the other guy.
Yep.
That's right.
And we'll be able to okay. And then
we're all going to dogpile and give the worst performance the most amount of shit. We absolutely mercilessly, I think we're all agreeing to
do
that.
a little bet between the 3 of us.
Chris, wait a minute. Are you one of the drivers?
I don't know where we stand on that. I think we need to still figure that out because I know Jaden and you are doing one each.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if I was still or not, so we have to figure that out.
Chris is going to be pulling in Belvedere, Illinois. We'll get you guys a date out there, so if anybody wants to come
Actually,
out
that was my poll.
Oh, Chris is going to be pulling in Woodstock next Wednesday.
I'm busy that day.
Wednesday.
I'm busy that day.
No, you're busy Tuesday.
And Wednesday.
And this is who I work with, people.
Yeah, so we're going to figure that out.
This is a little insight into
a little
planning.
suspense. A little suspense to leave this episode with, and we'll follow up next week.
Absolutely. Hey, guys, stick around. We're going to have our remote support expert, Sean Lynn, come in to talk to us about some L5P topics here in just a moment. Sean Lynn, remote support expert, how the hell are you?
Great. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing good. Sean, we did today's show a little bit out of order, but I was glad that we had time to bring you on to talk about a really exciting topic, which is L5P tuning installs.
Yeah, we get a lot of questions on it on a daily basis, so I've pretty much been through the ringer in terms of issues that have come up.
Now, with L5P tuning, guys, you're not able to just plug into your OBD2 port and flash. We actually have to remove your ECM and install a new unlocked ECM, and then either install the tuning or sometimes it'll come with the tuning already on it, depending on how you ordered it. Either way, it is a bit of a process, right? So it takes a little bit longer than any of our other tuning does to actually get going on your truck.
Yeah, and the one nice thing about it is that if you ever need to go back to stock, you can literally just install your stock ECM. It's as easy as that.
Nice. All right. Now, I know there are some very common questions, so I am going to lay out some of the questions, and then we'll see how you, Mr. Remote Support Expert, handle them. Sound good?
Works for me.
All right. Number one. How do I start the L5P swap process?
Well, the first thing you're going to need to do is obviously get the HP Tuners program and everything all set up. And you need to read segments off of the ECM. So it's part of the swap process and the instructions we provide. That just needs to be done before you actually remove the factory ECM, and then you can swap it over.
Okay, so I put the new ECM in after I've installed HP Tuners on my laptop, and I've done the read process, correct?
That's right.
The segment read process. Okay, cool. Once I have it in, how do I change the tunes?
As long as you ordered the full tune package from us, the new ECM will come with the tuning already loaded on it. So once you complete the swap process, basically all you have to do is cycle the ignition to the on position, which is for the older models, the 19 and down models, you just obviously put it to run. In the 2020s, you have to push and hold the ignition button for 7 seconds.
Okay.
You will then turn the cruise control off, and then if you hit the cruise cancel button and you hit the plus or the minus button, you should see your tachometer move to tell you that your truck is changing tunes and which one it's in.
Gotcha. Okay, so on your RPM gauge, your tachometer, you'll see like a 1 through 6 or something. I forget what it is. 1 through 5 maybe. That's 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 RPM. But what's really cool is with the L5P switch on the fly, if the truck's not running, so it's in the on position like you said, and then you go through the steering wheel commands, it'll actually go to point at the number. So the RPM gauge or the tachometer will actually point at the number. If it goes to 1, you're in tune 1. If it goes to tune 3, you're in tune 3, so on and so on. So you can actually see. What about once you're driving? How do you change tunes once you're driving?
The process is the same while the truck is actually running. Instead of the tachometer moving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the glow plug light will flash 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So the glow plug light will flash 3 times if I'm in tune 3 and 5 times if I'm in tune 5 and so on and so on.
Yep.
That's awesome. Okay. All right. And then which tune should I daily drive?
That would be dependent on how you actually drive and what you're doing with the truck. Do you tow a trailer on the daily basis, or are you more of like an unloaded driver just going to work?
Just unloaded commuter.
We recommend tune number 4, which is the street tune in that case, and it's just a good blend of performance and economy.
I love it. All right. How do I go back to stock? You mentioned it was really easy.
Yeah, there's 2 ways of doing that. The first way would be to just swap in the factory ECM, because then nothing has changed on the truck.
Do I need to read anything or flash anything when I do that, or can I literally just go out and unplug and unbolt?
You can just swap it over. There's nothing that needs to be done to do that.
Okay, awesome. Is there a second way?
The second way would be to actually go through the process of reading a stock file off, and HP Tuners can supply you one in the VCM editor program.
Okay, and then you just flash it on there, and so you could flash your modified ECM or your unlocked ECM back to a stock file. I agree with you. I don't know that that's super practical, right? Like, I think most people would just swap over to their stock ECM and keep it moving. I like that. All right, how do I get my remote start to work again?
Yeah, we get this question all the time. Just because the ECM is not the original one, because GM does all sorts of programming, obviously, with the ECM that came with the truck, and we just pretty much have to do the VATS relearn. And it's a procedure where GM programs the keys and everything together, and then it makes the remote start work again.
Okay, so just an L5P VATS relearn and remote start will be active.
Yep, we do them all the time here in shop. It is something that we actually have to have the truck here for, obviously, and it's typically done with at least 2 keys. We need both keys to do it.
Okay.
Anyone that has a GM scan tool, the new one, and then some knowledge, they can do it.
All right. So it doesn't have to be done here, but it's not like the old VATS relearn where I just cycle the key 20 times or whatever.
It's about a 30-minute plus procedure, depending on what's going on with it, but yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And then you do need a specialty tool, a GM scanner tool, to be able to perform the procedure.
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. What do I do if my computer won't recognize the MPVI2? That's the HP Tuners hardware. It also, in the future, will be called the RTD, Remote Tuning Device.
Yeah, we get this from time to time. Sometimes when people are trying to start the swap process, and basically your computer will sometimes install the drivers for you for the device, but when it doesn't, you just have to go to hptuners.com under downloads and choose the MPVI2 drivers and install them, and I've never seen an issue beyond that.
That's awesome. That's so rare when installing new drivers actually works.
The only other possibility is you have another program open, like another VCM scanner editor program opening, and it's trying to read off of that device.
Oh, yeah, you have two VCM scanner suites open at the same time, and you're in the one that it's not connected to. Like, why won't it connect?
Yep, that's pretty much the only time I've ever seen that with the drivers installed.
That's a classic. That's where I know your boss would say, okay, restart your computer.
Yeah, pretty much.
I love it. Any tips or tricks for guys who are going out to do an L5P tuning install for the first time?
Yeah, I would highly recommend you have a good stable internet connection, because HP Tuners does require an internet connection. And then as long as you have everything in front of you, you got the instructions laid out, it's typically not too bad, honestly. But
the pro tip is read the instructions.
yes,
Right.
If you read the instructions at least a couple times, it should make sense. But if for some reason you're hung up on something, that's why I have a job here.
I love it. Sean Lynn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Listeners, we really appreciate you guys checking out our episodes. Please make sure to go on and subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. If you have anything below a 5-star review, you're going to want to email that over. Don't put that out online. You're going to want to email that over to Chris Emke, that's CEHMKE, at DuramaxTuner.com. Thank you so much for listening.
I thought it was just my mustache. Either way.